Good evening, everybody. I am going to call to order the December 4th, 2024 Planning Board meeting. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Drew had something come up tonight, so this is being recorded, but it is not live. He will get it out as soon as he can tomorrow. All right, administrative board work. Approval of minutes. I don't think we have any minutes. Do we have any minutes?
Two sets.
Do we have two sets? Oh, yeah, it's the first meeting.
Lynn's all set. So, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of November 6th, 2024, as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a second. All in favor by roll call, starting with Ann.
Aye.
Giovanni Barani, aye.
I'm an alternate tonight.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Arthur Rugg, aye.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason Knights, aye.
Sean Faber, aye.
John Cruz, aye.
Jake Butler, aye. The meeting minutes have been approved.
So we've got a full house tonight.
We do.
9 voting members here,
We do.
and Tony.
Fantastic.
You wanna
All
do,
right.
November.
You want to do the second set?
Yeah, I'll do the second set here. Mr. Chair, I will make a motion that we approve the minutes of November 13th, 2024, as presented.
A motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a second. All in favor by roll call, starting with Ann.
Ann Champa, aye.
Giovanni Barani, aye.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Arthur Rugg, aye.
Jeff Penta, abstain.
Jason Knights, aye.
Sean Faber, aye.
John Cruz, aye.
Jake Butler, aye. And the minutes have been approved. All right, regional impact determinations, anything?
None this evening, Mr. Chair.
And discussions with town staff.
I have nothing this evening.
Kelly, all set?
Nothing this evening.
Fantastic. We will get into old business. We have a public hearing on an application for formal review of the multifamily residential phase of the Village on Technology Hill, PUD, map 28, lots 31-6, 29-2, map 17, lots 2, 5-3, 5-4, 5-5. Londonderry Holdings LLC is the owner and applicant, and this was continued from November 13th, 2024. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Dick Anagnost, co-developer. With me tonight is Ken Zielinski, our prime developer, along with Tony Nazaka from Stone River Architects to answer any architectural questions. Our esteemed engineer, Nick Golan, is to my right. And
Before we start talking about how esteemed he is, we do have to check this for completeness. It looks like we do not have any outstanding checklist items. I'm looking for a motion to accept the application for residential site plan approval as complete.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion, we accept the application for residential site plan approval as complete, as there is sufficient information for us to make a informed decision.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a second. Roll call vote, starting with Ann, please.
Aye. Ann Champa.
Lynn Wiles, oh, sorry.
Giovanni Barani, aye.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Arthur Rugg, aye.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason Knights, aye.
Sean Faber, aye.
John Cruz, aye.
Jake Butler, aye. Your application has been accepted as complete, and now, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to announce tonight that with assistance from the town engineer, John Trotter, we have broken ground on the infrastructure package. We've started clearing, we've begun site work, and now we'll be able to complete critical path infrastructure items and site work through the winter, like blasting and utilities and that sort of thing. So we're really excited to be here tonight. Without further ado, we'll present as you know, we've already gone in through infrastructure, traffic, the commercial and daycare portion of it. Tonight we'll be presenting to you the residential portion of it. Nick?
Excellent, thank you. Sure you can hear me. Kelly, do you have the graphic that is the aerial view by chance? Otherwise, if you wouldn't mind just putting up the overall site layout plan?
I don't have the graphic, so.
Okay. And I've got a flash drive of it that we can use when we talk about the buildings. Here. Sorry for the momentary delay.
Take your time. You're the only agenda item tonight.
We have your full attention.
Yep, for 3 hours. We always use all the time.
There's a
Working on
there's
questions.
a file on there, Kelly, that says aerial.
Relax.
That's a
Okay.
JPEG that would be helpful. All right, as that's, yep, that's the one right on the bottom. Perfect. All right, this is the Village on Technology Hill, a planned unit development. As Dick mentioned in the opening, this isn't the first you've seen of this project, but this is the first opportunity you've had to really review the residential and leasing building that's associated with the project. So just as a reminder for either those in the room or those listening at home or will be listening in the future, the Village on Technology Hill is a planned unit development that, once fully constructed, will consist of over 300,000 square feet of industrial and office space buildings, 439 apartments, which is in part what we're here for tonight, with associated leasing building, childcare, general retail store, with additional planned site amenities. So looking at the overall graphic, as we come in off of Akira Way, which is in the upper left-hand corner, we first travel by our retail area, which is approximately 15,000 square feet to the right, with our childcare directly to the left. Going down through that boulevard, we pass over the bridge that is associated with the project. Bridge being provided really for two elements. One, it's providing wildlife passage for larger mammals to get under that bridge, so that we have some unobstructed passage throughout that area of the site. Allows us to prevent any wetland impacts within that area. And it's also a really nice aesthetic feature. As you enter into the village, really provides that sense of place as you start to arrive. As we reach that T intersection, there is an exterior patio area as well as the leasing building. Directly adjacent to the leasing building is the children's playground. You can then see the circular routes that are associated with the infrastructure roads, which were previously approved. What we're doing now is really building on that prior infrastructure package, and we're installing additional sidewalks, we're installing additional buildings, we're installing our landscaping, and we're installing our lighting. Those are really the four primary components. So we're adding amenities and we're adding our buildings. Also, obviously, a part of this, we need to verify our prior drainage assumptions to make sure that everything is working correctly. What I'll do is walk us through just a little bit of the layout before I give Tony the opportunity to talk to our buildings, or talk about our buildings. You can see that there are on top of our buildings, my apologies, folks, I'm having a little bit of a mental. The solar panels that are listed are shown on the top of the buildings. This is the Village on Technology Hill, so solar is a large element of what we're proposing here. Relative to the buildings and the components of the site that really help tie this overall site together is our landscaping and our lighting. Lighting is primarily the function of 20-foot tall site lights. These are full dark sky compliant. We had the opportunity to review this with the Heritage Commission. So we do have both pole-mounted as well as wall-mounted fixtures. Again, these are approximately 20 feet above grade. From a landscape perspective, so we had the opportunity to really, write some of our rules when it came to our PUD on how landscaping would be addressed. The spacings of those plantings, the types of those plantings were all addressed in the PUD master plan. The intent being that these are native or native improved species. So we do have a fair variety of trees that are located throughout the development that have been rendered on that graphic. But the idea is that we've provided trees to break up and soften the scale of those buildings. Multiple types of trees that bear different types of seeds and fruits and nuts that help support our local wildlife, and really enhances the wildlife benefits so that as we transition from the built environment in and around those buildings to the exterior where we have our wildlife conservation mix and then to our existing vegetated areas, provides kind of that nice layered approach that makes a lot of sense for a development such as this. Other elements in regards to the landscaping we have evergreen trees. Those provide our winter interest. Also a couple of more specimen type trees. We're looking at our American beech, white oak, red oak. These can get as tall as 80 feet. The initial planting heights are a fair value so that we're not looking at 3 and 4 footers and waiting for 25 years for these to grow in, but these are of a good substantial size so that they do provide, again, that initial warmth, that initial sense of home for our residents. Also included beyond the trees is a fair amount of shrubs. The idea, again, with these shrubs is, really a layered approach of varying heights, varying colors, varying textures, which really provides those year-round accents to highlight the buildings and the colors that have been chosen by our architectural group and the ownership. We do understand that there's a staff report that has been provided. So we've talked a little bit about lighting. We'll talk about our buildings shortly. I guess I'd be remiss if I don't make mention of our parking configurations. You can see it follows our loop roads. There are really no primary large parking lots that are associated with this project, and that is intentional. We're not looking to create necessarily a large mass of pavement that is associated with the residential units, but again, more of a park-type atmosphere with the open common, which is our passive open space. The active open space associated with this, we have a basketball court, we have the children's playground, and then obviously a dog park that's being provided as well. Specific to the leasing building, I had mentioned when you come into that main entryway, we do have a patio area, have an opportunity for grills or otherwise, so that if folks are looking to have a family event or otherwise, they'll have that opportunity. And then interior to the leasing building, there is also a public space that would be available for that same use when we have those days of inclement weather. Some of the items that I realized that were addressed in the staff report, I'll speak to. Snow storage is one we always talk about. One of the benefits with this design is this large center green, which provides the ideal location for our snow storage. I believe we have the correct plantings as far as the tree species that line that area that are salt tolerant, so we don't have to worry about their potential demise as we stockpile our snow. And with the amount of snow that would have the potential to be stockpiled there, we should make for a pretty good sledding hill for our kids and our other gleeful residents who may want to take out their skis or otherwise. Sorry, we talked about landscaping, we talked about lighting, talked a little bit about the parking. One of the comments that we had initially was just making sure we have enough parking. The parking is prescribed based off of the planned unit development master plan, using the ITE rates that were approved. We have grouped those parking spaces so that we can show that we have an adequate number of spaces to serve each building. These are not assigned parking spaces. This is more of the equivalent of a city street, and you have to find a space. Now, we feel like we have provided a fair balance of that parking, intermingled between the buildings, so that regardless of where you live, you shouldn't have to walk a far distance in order to enter into your home. Sorry? ADA parking obviously provided to the extent required, both at our leasing building as well as in the immediate vicinity of the front entrance to each one of these buildings. One of the comments we had initially was just making sure we had the appropriate spot shots to make sure that those areas can be constructed appropriately. Those spot shots were provided as part of our infrastructure package and then are really duplicated here just for consistency to make sure we have the information that we need. Regarding design review comments, I believe we have addressed the planning staff comments. Assessing department, I'm not aware of any specific comments. Conservation Commission had 2 suggestions for us at our last meeting. One was to evaluate the potential use of one of those items was to make sure that our evergreen trees didn't inappropriately shade our paved areas. I think we're in good shape. Those areas are appropriately set back. And then also to evaluate whether or not EV charging stations would be appropriate. I can say from a master planning standpoint, the electrical engineers have looked at it and have the ability to provide the infrastructure for it. Dick will be able to speak a little bit. I'll give him that chance now.
So when we originally came before you to get the PUD approved, we agreed that we would provide the infrastructure for charging stations and put them in as needed. So when the parking lots are all built, the conduits and everything necessary to provide the EV stations will be there. And then as demand for those rises, we'll install the actual the actual EV stations for charging.
Thank you, sir. Just reading through the other elements. So Heritage Commission, I think, had a pretty favorable review. They felt comfortable with the items that we've selected, and I believe that was expressed in their report. Sewer Division, now in that infrastructure really was intended to service these buildings. We do have our state sewer approval for the proposed residential and leasing building as well. Fire department, we have had the opportunity to review the project with the fire department. It's our understanding that relative to the site design, we have no outstanding items. We've provided appropriate spacing for all of our hydrants. And that as of just today, Ken Zielinski had the opportunity to sit down with the fire department to finalize the addresses that are going to be associated with these buildings. So I acknowledge that the plan set is out of date relative to those elements, but that will be updated in a subsequent submittal to make sure that is addressed. One item we did not have as much time to review is we do realize there were some Stantec comments, some DPW comments that were received. I've had the opportunity to glance through them, but not necessarily verify all of the concerns and how they're best addressed. It appears one of the primary elements was making sure that all the impervious areas are appropriately accounted for within the drainage report. I wasn't able to go into the HydroCAD, John, and verify whether or not there are elements missing, but I do remember from our prior dialogue that although our upper basin has that 1 foot of freeboard exactly, the lower stormwater basin that area drains into has about 3 inches of freeboard in excess of your 1 foot requirement. It doesn't sound like a lot, but because of the size of the basin, that's in the neighborhood of 27 to 30,000 cubic feet of additional storage. So understood if the board has any concerns and wants to see that drainage rectified prior to taking any action, but otherwise we'd be happy to work with staff to make sure we can resolve that item for them as well.
You talking about the impervious area, impervious areas?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So I'll try and be relatively short with the commentary. I know you've seen a lot of this project and really just give you the opportunity to ask any questions.
Sure. All right, I'm going to, they'll start off, as this being a public hearing, I'll start off with our staff. I'll come to the board, we'll go to the public, and then we'll come back to the board. Staff?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'll summarize the memorandum dated December 4th, 2024. Under design review items, item number 1, they need to continue pursuing their sanitary sewer discharge permit and the FAA permits. Item number 2, providing the owner's address and applicant's address on the plan set. Item 3, the revised PUD master plan does not properly identify the current roadway names consistent with the latest updated infrastructure plans. Item 4 is related to the overall residential layout plan and site layout plans. And again, as Nick indicated, in item A is as it relates to the 911 addresses, and it sounds like Ken has addressed that today. Item B, the sidewalk at building number 3 and the sidewalk to the dog park are wider than 6 feet but are not dimensioned. We're requesting that they, in addition, the sidewalk is absent to the access gate for the basketball court, so it's some cleanup work on that one. Item C is stop signs and stop bars at the driveway of optical loop. Again, some cleanup work, and as well as the item D, the leasing office indicates a patio area and other features that are not labeled. Item 5 are comments related to the grading and drainage. Item 6 is regarding the construction entrance. Item 7 is the turning movement plan. It appears that it indicates the fire truck would hit the curb northeast of building 1. We're requesting they review that with the fire department. Item 8 are comments related to the construction phasing plan. Item 9 are comments related to the construction details. And item 10, as Nick indicated, they're missing approximately 1.9 acres of impervious. Staff is very concerned with that, so I would tap the brakes and we should figure that out, plain and simple. As Nick indicated, you know, that I'm sure it can be addressed, but it should be addressed now. Item 11 is verifying the DRC comments of the Planning, Assessing, Conservation Commission, Fire Department, and the Heritage Commission, as well as the Sewer Division. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, John. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to point out, I did make a note regarding the fact that the applicant has provided a phased approach to this residential phase of development. In other words, they've proposed a phasing plan that does not state that they're going to construct all 439 units at one time. I would recommend that that discussion take place this evening, just for the public and the board's benefit. Additionally, you'll see, and as the applicant pointed out, there is, are two comments from the Conservation Commission, as well as one comment from the Heritage Commission. The board will need to make a decision on how you wish to handle those, should you decide to go with a conditional approval this evening.
Thank you. All right, I will bring it to the board. Board, do we have any questions, comments?
Got a couple.
Sure.
Sure. Probably pretty straightforward. The solar panels on top of all the buildings, are you planning on using the power generated on-site, or are you gonna be putting that into the grid?
We will be using 100% of the energy generated on-site, and we will still need additional power when the industrial buildings come online.
Okay.
But
great.
for the most part, this will probably be the first residential development in New Hampshire that's been built that will be self-sufficient.
I think that's great, so, yeah, I like
It's one of the
that.
project goals, and
Yeah, I like that.
we're hoping it comes to fruition.
So then my other question goes to the airport. So I was looking at the plan. You're about 410 feet at your highest elevation, and you have a lot of solar panels going on top of the buildings. Have you had any conversations with the airport about the installation or the need for a red light or anything like
Yep.
that?
So we have filed with the FAA for our permits. They're in an interim status, and that's just the final vetting process, essentially, prior to the issuance of permits. We're expecting that we will receive a notice of determination of no hazard, but the expectation is that it'll be lighted. That was what took place with the adjacent buildings that were previously constructed. So given the height and the location, that would be our expectation.
Whereabouts is the high point
The
on
overall
that.
project site?
Pardon?
Of the overall project site?
of the overall project site?
When we look at it in regards to the residential buildings, it's dead center. That's essentially the high point, and it bleeds in all directions from there. Overall, the high point for the entire property is going to be, there we go, in the northeast corner, the foundation building.
Okay.
That is the crow's nest and looks out on the community.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm all set.
Anything else from the board? Mr. Rudd?
Any more details on the phasing? Specifics, please.
Certainly, and actually, if I can, and I know I didn't plan this in advance, but we do have Bruce Blazin in the audience. He is the architect of the phasing of the buildings, and I know how much he loves to get called up here, so I'm gonna take that opportunity.
All right.
Bruce Blazon, I'm the construction manager, principal of North Branch Construction. Phasing plan, the sequencing of the buildings as they're large, it takes about 14 to 15 months to build a single building. Our lag and stagger is about anywhere from 6 weeks to 8 weeks. So it's a 2.5 to 3.5 year build out of those buildings. Does that answer the phasing question on the housing side?
I think so. Did
Say
that
that,
make sense
that
to
last
you?
part one more time, please.
The total build out from start to finish of the residential units is about a 2.5 to 3.5 year build out based on the number of buildings and the durations of those buildings.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Easy enough?
Anything else from the board?
Just
Mr. D?
quick question on the phasing. How many buildings at any given time would be under construction?
So the goal is to, maximize the efficiency of the seasons.
Yep.
So many of the buildings will get their foundations in during the 2025 spring to 2025 fall. We'll make the determinations how many buildings can't kick to the next season, but it's really to minimize the impact of the finances on the owners group. But lots of them will be worked on, but the elevation side takes much longer. There are only so many crews in the state of New Hampshire capable of doing this work, and we do want to keep the work local, so.
Great, thanks.
Mr. D?
Several questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based on the elevations here, what would you estimate the view shed is of this development from Grenier Field Road?
Yeah, I don't think I can point to you to answer that one. Gosh, it's a great question. I don't know that it's something we specifically contemplated, the view shed element of that. I'd say the reality is there's considerable mature forest that exists between our development and those other portions of town, immediately adjacent, I should say.
But you're going uphill,
Correct. And it is a staggered approach.
so you plateau?
So essentially, we have our lower level, which is the outer loop, and then that slopes up, and the next level is a little bit higher. And then really, for the most part, we're sloping from the southwest to the northeast from there.
So you don't know?
I don't have I don't know that I can specifically answer. I can certainly better evaluate that question and come back with an answer, but I don't know that anything I said tonight would be a little bit of guesswork.
Understood. I'd like to talk about roofs. The roofs on the residential pieces are flat, just flat, probably a rubber roll, whatever, or,
They would be white TPO membrane.
got it, thank you. I noticed that several times now, there's been comments from the Heritage Commission about at least two of your other buildings that you've changed to asphalt. Would you rather have metal roofs?
On the flat or slope portions, sir?
On the sloped portions of two of your buildings, the Heritage Commission had said that they would rather have shingled roofs, asphalt shingles, and I believe you yielded to their advisory comment. And I'm curious
I think with
what
the,
your others would be.
I'll speak for the designer a bit. I think with the amount of solar covering the roofs, the cost of a metal roof is really a wasted effort, because everything facing south is 100% solar panel.
Mhm. So then your comment is, from a cost perspective, it's cheaper for you to do the asphalt?
It's a more economical solution for asphalt roofing.
Are the solar panels gonna outlive the life of an asphalt shingle?
So a typical solar panel is warranted for 30 years. Data shows they last 35, 40 years. And asphalt shingles are lifetime now, so pick a lifetime.
Who's like,
Understood. And so it actually worked in your favor that they asked you to make that change because it's gonna be cheaper in the long run. So
It's a
I
very
guess-
acceptable.
Question for staff, please, Mr. Chair.
yeah, absolutely.
Is it, Kelly, is it a typical comment for conservation, conscom, to be suggesting EV chargers? Is that a conscom thing?
I don't know about typical, but I know that the Conservation Commission does utilize kind of their renewable energy umbrella, if you will. Conserving energy, conserving green space, that's kind of the umbrella I think that they're putting this under. But I would just reiterate that this board is the body that needs to make that decision. An EV charging station is a structure, may be subject to permitting. So that, again, that's something for this board to consider.
Thank you. So, so, Mr. Chair, I'm of the opinion that an EV charging station in basically what is a private, quote-unquote, development is up to the developer. I couldn't find anything in our regulations that said anything about it,
We do not have specific regulation for EV charging stations, again,
which is why I couldn't find it.
yes. But I do want to point out, though, that through the building permitting process, you would, of course, have to deal with electrical, whatever else that the building inspector may require through those codes.
Sure, got it. Thank you. I'm all set for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Not a problem. Anything else from the board? Ann?
I have a question. Normally, we see handicap parking, and it's right off the entrance to the building. You have it offset a little bit. Why is that?
I could answer that question for our esteemed engineer. 2 reasons. So, in this type of unit, people tend to move in, move out, periodically. Keeping that center corridor open for that offload was a part of the design that we had discussed a lot. We actually, a nice impact of this is the owner's committed to snow melt systems at the front entryways to keep that constant, clear path throughout the winter, minimize salt usage.
Will that effort be extended to the handicapped areas?
They do come out on that main sidewalk. It's indeterminate whether they go on the tip downs yet. We're not quite there in design.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else from the board?
I have one
Yeah,
more.
Ann, go ahead.
Just because I noticed this at another development. Are your street signs gonna be, what are they, fluorescent? The lettering on them?
Reflective. Reflective, I think.
Reflective, excuse me.
Retroreflective.
Reflective.
They should be. That's what the requirement is.
I think we have our answer.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, John.
Anything else from the board? Quick, do the buildings have elevators?
Yes, all buildings have elevators.
Thank you. I don't have anything else,
One
Ann?
last question. What's the penthouse? I thought I read that in
It's a great question, ma'am. I've just gone a
It's in
little
there somewhere.
Yeah, you know what, I'm not even here, just go right ahead, Bruce. I brought you up here.
The penthouses were to give a full access stairway to the roof lines so that the service technicians didn't have to go through a roof hatch, so that fire inspections, so those, there's lots going on there on the roofs. So the penthouse was to give a full stairway and a walkout.
Just a
Full-size door.
name. You don't have another apartment out
No,
there
ma'am.
for yourself, do you?
It's usually
Just curious.
usually not the penthouse that people envision to be at the top of apartment building.
I get you now. Thanks.
All right, anything else? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, so we will invite anybody from the public up to come talk. Good evening, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, if you could state your name and address, I'd appreciate it.
Robin Stewart, 522 Mammoth. I'm confused because I don't know what phase is going first. I thought I heard at a previous meeting it was going to be residential all first that was going to be built.
Could you guys elaborate on what's yeah, see, that's what happens when you sit down, you should have just stayed up here.
Sorry, Bruce Blazon for the contractor. So the goal is,
If you want to just come to the mic a little bit, and you can actually even use the one that is, if you want to leave that to the public, you can sit down right there.
I didn't sign up for this.
You're doing my job now.
Do you want to answer, Dick?
Sure.
Go ahead. Apologize.
So, the original proposal under the PUD was to build the infrastructure out all at once, was to begin with the commercial building, okay, then move to residential. After residential will come at least one, if not two, of the industrial buildings, and then work our way back out to include a shell for the daycare building. Did I do all right, Bruce?
Specific timelines would be the summer of 2025 would be the goal to break ground on the first industrial building, while we have already started a couple of the foundations for the residential side. Coming online, they should start to come online about the same time.
Your first industrial building, is that the northeastmost building
The
there?
larger building to the
Yeah.
northeast, yes.
Okay.
So just so I understand, residential is being built now, and then one of the industrial buildings is going to be built at close to the same time?
So the retail building, the 20,000 square foot industrial building, and the housing are all sequential starts within a season.
Okay, because I don't understand how, if you're going to have, or at least this was my understanding when I read your PUD and from the other meetings, if the residential is supposed to be only for people who work there, how can you have residential buildings first when you have no place for them to work?
First, it's not just for only the people that are in our,
That's kind of what your PUD says. It says that the concept is to make it an old-fashioned village, so
Correct.
to speak,
But
where
the-
people can work and live in the same.
but
And-
but that village concept is also open to the other industrial buildings that are in the park.
Okay, so that's open to, anybody can live there.
Correct. The primary goal is to provide it for our employees. whereby that's why Bruce is explaining that we're gonna do a couple of the residential buildings at the same time the industrial building is being built, because the people in that industrial building will need a place to live. Okay, and those buildings residentially will be staged and come on probably one at a time. Okay, so as he builds them, we'll get a CO, we'll begin renting, and as he builds the industrial and it goes up, those employees will need places to live.
So I understand that when you bring people in from outside of Londonderry to live, that helps the community, gas stations, et cetera. People stop and buy things within the town. That's great. But it doesn't address all the things that we're gonna have to live with. I live in the village, the real village, the old one, and it doesn't address all the problems we're gonna have from what you guys are doing now. And my understanding was that nobody was going to address the intersection on Page and Old Mammoth for traffic. The Old Mammoth, which we've been fighting for 11 years, finally got some striping down the middle, which kind of worked. And we did get stop signs, which has stopped the FedEx trucks and the UPS and all of those, the Milkit trucks. They've slowed down tremendously. Hasn't slowed down the speeding or the cars at all. And it's not the police, because the police show up pretty regularly. So it's not they're having a problem. So the more trucks that go to that light over on Page and Rockingham, the more cars that cut down Old Mammoth. The intersection of Page and Old Mammoth was already a disaster. I mean, we've had so many accidents there. The Old White Tavern, where Steve lives, has had cars in their in their yards numerous times. There was a car that went through the garage on the other corner. And none of that's being addressed. If you're going to bring in other people who are gonna have to drive there, they're not going to be self-contained. What are you doing to protect us? Because we already pay our taxes, and we already have to live here. So what's gonna happen to protect all of us? That's my question.
Can you talk a little bit about traffic study?
Sure. Now, understandably, we addressed traffic as a separate meeting just because it was so far-reaching, making sure that we understood what intersections were being evaluated and how we went about that. So just to back up 10,000 steps, we had a meeting with the town and their reviewer to scope that study. You know, what intersections are we going to be evaluating? What's our background growth? What are developments that have been approved but yet to be constructed, so that we can make sure with the model that we are creating that we've accounted for all these different users, so that whatever improvements that we're proposing that are on the subject site, that we evaluate those off-site intersections to see if any improvements are going to be required. Now, in the instance of this project, 2 off-site improvements were required. Those are left-hand turn lanes at Technology and Akira. And remind me the second one, John?
Kitty Hawk.
Kitty Hawk. I know John's been out there with our chief engineer, just evaluating those sections just to make sure we incorporate those improvements as most appropriate. One of the elements that we had discussed was one of the elements that you brought up, those inclusion of those stop signs, that was a separate item that the town council had worked towards, and that we had made the determination, or the board had made the determination that we were going to see that through, that no additional improvements would be proposed in that area. There are opportunities to do different things, but the idea is let's see through first whether or not that improvement could be incorporated. So the project has mitigated its traffic to the extent required with those off-site improvements. So I'm not sure if I'm entirely answering the abutter's question, but I
Not
just
at
wanted
all.
to make sure that I'm giving the background on what did we do and why. And to the overarching question of, well, how are we protecting the public? We're incorporating the appropriate off-site improvements, checking the appropriate intersections to make sure they function at levels that are appropriate with this use at its 100% capacity.
And what dictates those off-site improvements? What is the mechanism that says you need to do this? That's a result of your
Sure.
traffic study,
In a
correct?
lot of cases, it's delays. When you reach a certain delay factor that's no longer perceived as being acceptable, or a queuing that could potentially back up and cause issues with motorists, then those improvements are incorporated. And that's the reason for the left-hand turn lanes. They were borderline, but in lieu of trying to argue the point, we acknowledge that this is a development of good size, and that to incorporate some off-site improvements to make sure that those adjacent roadways can appropriately accommodate us both now and in that future year were deemed appropriate. And that's what we moved forward and asked for approval that ultimately was given.
So I understand the delays. Those delays are what going to cause people to drive down Old Mammoth. It's just real simple. That's what they do now. And you've got trucks and construction for the next 4 or 5 years, and people who are moving in from out of town and have to come and live their lives within our community. So they're gonna travel those roads too. We just had the police, I believe, ask for 2 more traffic police, and we haven't even hit any of this yet. And that's just up our end. I think there's numerous other down the southern end of town that are being, but I can't concern myself with that. I have to concern myself with where I live. And if you walk in this building, the first thing you see are pictures of the old village. My house is up there. So clearly, this was somewhat of an important area to you guys, but you're just letting us dangle out in the wind with the traffic. Delays is not enough to judge. How are you going to stop the traffic? How are you going to let us live our lives when you have people shooting down this road all the time?
Thank you. I know, Sean, I think traffic is a hot topic at the council, I believe. And
Yes.
If you want to speak a little bit on the council side of things and
So with this, they've done traffic studies for this development, made sure it falls within certain thresholds, but I understand just throughout town, we have other systemic problems that aren't necessarily related to this development. Since I've got on the council, it's been a hot button thing for me that I was talking with previous town manager, Mike Malaguti. I'll continue talking with our acting town manager and our future town manager, because I think we don't have a problem that's solved by fixing one intersection. The stuff that we did at Old Mammoth Road, I'm glad that went through. It's having some effect. If it continues not to have an effect, please let me know. But there's a lot of other intersections. There's a lot of other roads that need to be taken care of, and we need to look at this at an overarching level and start solving this for the community. And I can't speak to what happened in the past, but I can speak to what I want to do going forward and what I want to try to help and solve this community. For this community, and I see this as a big problem. Like it's in my top 5 for sure. So these things also don't get fixed easily. Roads and infrastructure aren't something where 6 months we're going to have an answer that's going to be right there for you, but it's got to start somewhere. And so I've been starting now on moving forward with that.
Well, just
is
for
Old Mammoth a no-through trucking?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That has absolutely no difference. And you're going to have trucks coming from the other side now. Whatever is going on over there, I don't even know, on Page Road, where they just cut down all the trees along White Tavern so that they could put in, I guess, a water system. That's like no respect for the village. I mean, these places have been here forever. My house was built in 1890. That's a long time. This town should respect that village and the things that have the center, what used to be the center. My carriage house used to have where they dropped the mail. The Widow's Walk is where all the people used to come to wait for the carriage so that they could drop off all the mail and then go up to White's Tavern and stay before they went to Concord. Those are important things to this town, as noted by what's on these walls out here, what's in the history books of Londonderry. And it's just not being thought about at all, as far as I can say. We don't think that it's being considered enough. And if you're asking for more police now, come March, we're going to have no choice but to vote everything in again, because you have to have these systems. We absolutely have to have them. We have to have good fire. We have to have good police. We have to have good highway departments to keep things going. But we don't have a choice now, because all these things keep going up. They're not paying extra to help us out at all. I think I think it was water that had to be run over to the industrial park on Page. I'm not sure, that's what I was told. So rather than cut down all.
So it is water that, I believe it's water that's going up there. Do you have an estimated idea of what your tax revenue to the town of Londonderry is gonna be yearly at full build-out?
We do. We'll actually be the second largest taxpayer in the town.
Behind Granite Ridge?
Correct. And our positive fiscal impact is an extra $1,539,000 to the town, over and above the taxes necessary to operate our project. So
I
we're
did, I
tax
read that,
positive.
I read your report, and I understand that, but it doesn't include all the extra police, doesn't include all the extra fire. I think the amount of people you said were going to schools was minimal compared to what, you can't have that many apartments and have 19 kids go to school. It just doesn't, it doesn't work. You can't have, you have to have X amount of cars that are coming and going, no matter what. Even if you work there, somebody's gonna go down to Hannaford, somebody's gonna go down to Market Basket or wherever they wanna go, Dunkin' Donuts. They're still gonna be there. I understand the studies, and I got the reports, I read them. But it doesn't really slow anything down. Common sense at some point needs to take over, I guess, is my thought.
Thank you, Jason. I'll let you talk, and then we will,
Wrap it up.
we'll see if
Yeah,
there's
just
anybody
very
else.
quickly, I live in the village on Hall Road, so the village is considered when we're having these discussions. I've been here 20 years on Hall Road, so I've seen the changes and I can completely empathize with everything you're saying.
Well,
So
thank you.
It is not, I can assure you, it is not being ignored.
Okay, thanks for
you.
listening.
Anything else from the public? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Bob Mill, 569 Mem Road. I'm in the village area. Many of you already know that. The one question I have, to maintain the town ordinance, it says no structures over 35 feet, except for a few, like antennas and things of that. Are you able to build 4 stories and still maintain the 35 feet ton requirement and no higher than that?
Relative to the PUD and the underlying zoning district, we're within the maximum is 50 feet, and we do fall below that threshold.
Yeah, but the overall ton requirement is no higher than 35.
I think the
This is
it being a PUD
Yeah.
has kind
its
of,
own
has its own
regulations.
set of regulations,
but
which I believe is
that's-
50 feet. Is it
I think
50?
that was a mistake at the time, agreed to that. The other thing is I agree that the intersection on Page, Mammoth, and Drenia Field needs a 4-way stop sign, is only a two-way stop sign right now. Going back to when we were,
Where were you, Paige, where?
Page, Drenia Field, and Mammoth, the lady was just talking
Four-way,
about some
okay,
of that.
Thank you.
You drive over the road and you go from one road to another. But anyway, going back, probably August when we were doing the infrastructure, one of the things that they brought up is they wanted to run more of the truck traffic all up Akia Road to the industrial area. I think it should be spread out where some of it going up Kitty Hawk and some of it should be going up Akia. I mean, it was gonna all go up Kitty Hawk. And even maybe spread out some of it going on the technology before it gets on the Kia. So not all the traffic is going in one spot. That was an idea I had. I remember one of the meetings back. I think I didn't meet. It was a September meeting, I think, and that they were going to bring that up. I'm not sure now, but that's something to consider. But it was all going to go up one way to the Kitty Hawk in that way. Okay, but I think that's basically what I got on my mind for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Real quick, John, correct me if I'm wrong. That intersection used to be a 4-way stop sign, correct?
Yep.
The 4-way stop sign went away because there was complaints of the amount of noise coming from trucks?
Correct.
From trucks stopping at those intersections. So we
Correct.
took a 4-way intersection, heard the complaints, made it a 2-way stop, to avoid the noise coming from trucks stopping at that intersection.
Correct.
Thank
The
you.
improvements, that were done at Page and Rockingham Road were subsequent to FedEx coming in.
Yeah.
And it was a long time coming that that intersection would become
Needed to be upgraded.
signalized
Yeah.
as it is today, because that's the gateway to the airport from exit 5.
There's
Thank-
an, there's an awful lot of accidents right there in that intersection over the years. When you have an accident, you got property damage, you can have people damage, and you gotta take that into consideration. But the person that was there, is long gone, that made the original complaint about noise in the night where the trucks would grind, would stop there and then go on over to 28.
Would that still be a four-way stop sign had there not been
The complaint,
so many complaints about it?
I don't believe it would be, because again, it goes back to, that's
The light now.
That's the
I think
the gateway to the airport.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
the four-way stop was there before
Before
the
the light.
signalized
yeah.
intersection was
Correct.
there.
Yeah.
And so it made sense to have a four-way stop sign. Now, the trucks and the cars and motorcycles and bicycles and you, when you're jogging at lunch, go straight through to the light, which makes much more sense because the light is so, the light is so close to that intersection anyway, the signalized intersection. So, to me, Mr. Merrill, it makes more sense to not have a four-way stop sign there.
well, what about all the accidents over the
You know,
years?
it's
Since
funny.
they made the changes on the
Yeah, it's funny
the-
because
a
we
two-way
hear,
stop
we
sign.
hear about this at this level from the folks who live it, because you're one of the people that live it, and the lady just talked
Yeah.
about, she lives it too, and the people up there all live it. And then the police chief comes in and he gives us a report, and it's totally different from what you all are living. So I don't know where the disconnect is, but there's a disconnect somewhere, because you all are saying one thing and the police chief is saying another thing with his reports, and, you know, we do what we can.
I've been to traffic safety committees, and at the time, the chief dug through the records of one of his people did, and he agreed that there's a number of accidents, and this was a
There's
number of years
Absolutely, there's a
ago.
number. I agree
mean,
with you.
Yeah,
I'm not saying there's
And-
no accidents there. We have intersections in town that are way worse than that particular intersection right now. Neither one of them is good,
Yeah.
but I'm just, you know,
it must
it is
be,
what it is.
it must
so.
be some down like exit 5, where there's regularly accidents, I suspect. But that isn't what I've been concentrating on. Well, I just want to get a four-way stop sign there, so those people will not be bumping,
So I would
doing-
suggest, that the traffic study, safety, what I
Traffic
Safety
safety
study.
committee.
that group, that continue to go to those meetings, and I'll meet you there.
but,
And we'll see
well,
if we can figure it out.
I tried in the past, and I don't feel I'm getting anywhere, so, but,
New sheriff in town in that committee too, so
yeah,
you might want to try again with a new chairperson.
yeah, but I knew with the people at the time I was on it, I was not gonna get anywhere, but I keep putting the word out. Maybe by the time someday, I'll see it.
Well, understand, your comments are important.
Yeah.
They've always been important, they will continue to be important, and we encourage you to keep commenting.
Yeah. Obviously, we're getting a little bit off track going on, but, you know, we should be concentrating more on Technology Hill, where we're kind of getting a little bit off.
Yeah.
Off on the
Thank you, Mr.
subject.
Thank you,
That
thank you.
happens
Thank you,
once
Mr.
in a
Mayor.
while.
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize.
Supposed
if
to
I'm
do that,
getting
but I
too
don't like it.
far.
I don't like interrupting.
Everybody's taking each other's jobs tonight. It's okay. We're all sharing.
Thank you,
Well-
Mr. Merrill.
Hey, anybody at the town ever want to put a stop sign that I was on a whole time? I got one.
Thank you, sir. Anything else from the public? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the board.
I have a question.
Sir.
So with these positions, are these new positions or are they relocated positions that you're intending to?
Most of them are new.
Okay. So then when someone says they're going to be bringing in a whole bunch of people from outside of town, that's not necessarily true. These jobs would be open for residents of London area too, just as well.
Correct.
They're not already pre-filled jobs. Okay, thank you.
And to go back to the concept, Mr. Faber, the concept is a live, work, play concept. So the more people that we can have live there, the less trips leave the site, and all of the trips were identified in our traffic study, so.
And I think it's just-
That was in the traffic report that we had.
Yeah, so one more thing, I think it's important also to understand that your mission statement, to quote the young lady who was up here earlier, does intimate that it's gonna be people that work there are gonna be living there. That's the concept, but there's also some pretty strict federal laws that you have to comply with, that, just to thumbnail it, say, you can offer residences to the workers, but they don't have to say yes. And if you make them do that, you're gonna have 3 hots and a cot, which I know you don't necessarily want. So there's some pretty strict federal stuff going on.
You're
with
correct, it's
regard to
called the
that.
fair housing laws.
Yeah, it's a, fair housing laws is probably one of the more stricter things that are enforced in I can't speak for other states, but I know in this state for a fact, because I read about it all the time in the trades, and you gotta be very, very careful with that stuff. So, enough said, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. D. Anything else? Yes, sir.
John, I have a question. You had brought up the concern with the impervious area.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit more?
The calculation as it exists now doesn't take into consideration they lost about 2 acres of impervious area. So they need to go back into the drainage report and confirm that, make sure that they've included that in their analysis.
Is that something you would be comfortable tackling with them, or do you feel that's?
I'd
Something
prefer that
that-
they come back here.
Okay.
That way we're all on this, because you know my feelings about drainage.
Well, and, as we've discussed
Not,
over and
not
over
that you
again, it's
guys will understand the calculations or anything, but I just want you to be in a big bed with me.
sounds-
Can I
thank
ask
you.
a follow-up on that?
Giovanni.
So if they reduce their impervious by 1.93 acres, wouldn't that imply that the retention area for is overbuilt?
So they haven't taken that into consideration. So they lost that, so now it's disappeared.
Well,
So
the
po- but in
retention
ponds-
areas
But the
are,
ponds are already almost at capacity.
but they reduce their impervious area.
Yeah. They reduced it, the ponds are nearly at capacity, but they need to plug it back in. So,
So you're gonna have them reduce the ponds,
no, the ponds may need to be bigger.
but they reduce their impervious area. So isn't the flowage to the ponds created by impervious?
Correct?
And so they reduce that.
Yeah,
So theoretically, the volume into the pond would be
Reduced.
reduced. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
yeah, so it's reduced, so when they plug it back in, the ponds may not be big enough.
Are you saying they're putting the impervious stuff back in at a certain point?
They're gonna have to. Nick, you understand the comment?
Yeah, I understand the comment.
Okay.
There's a
Let's
concern
try not
there's-
to engineer it, people, just.
There's a concern that
all
there's a
due
certain
respect.
element of one of the parking lots that's not accounted for in the drainage study. That impervious area was left out. I haven't had the opportunity to review it against our drainage studies to confirm if that is the case. But if it is, then we'll evaluate our basins. As mentioned in our opening,
Yep.
yes, one of our basins is at capacity for the 1 foot of freeboard, but the basin that is downstream of it has an excess of capacity. So I have no concerns that this isn't going to work the way it's supposed to. It will. It's just working it through with John to make sure it's to their expectation.
I guess my question would be,
I'm
what,
not an engineer, and I'm not gonna
Yeah.
play one on TV. I would really want, obviously the engineers to really hash that out.
that was gonna be what I was getting at is,
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, no, I wasn't saying it like that. Yeah. I guess what I was asking myself is, what would change if it were to come back? I mean,
Yeah.
still ultimately, you have to meet the requirement, you have to meet what is being asked of you from a drainage standpoint, so my only question is, what would be the difference between?
It would not be a condition of approval. It would be addressed.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the
it
condition
would
of
be a
approval is that
condition
it
of
needs to
approval
be
would-
addressed, correct?
And if they can't address a condition of approval, they come back here anyway.
Yes.
So either way, it gets done. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
For lack of a better terms, I mean, one way or the other, it's getting done, and I'm, to Jeff's point, I'm not necessarily an engineer, so I don't know that I'm just going to defer to what they say the engineers say needs to be done, whether it's a condition of approval, or if they come back and it's not a condition of approval. I don't know.
Yeah, none of us have any input on
That's what I
that.
mean, there's no,
But if something,
It's-
if
it's-
something
it's an
needs to tweak on the
engineering
site,
thing.
though, if something needs to tweak on the site, Nick, then we're coming back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
If you approve it tonight with that condition of
Yeah.
approval, along with all the other things, and they try to work it out and they can't, and something else has to be changed, then they're coming back here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yes.
so,
And I just want to just be clear about something, because this is a regulation. That's why it's being discussed here tonight, just for the benefit of the public and everybody else. That is why this board is looking at it. It's not just an engineering item that's sitting out there. It's a specific regulation that needs to be met.
yes, correct. So irregardless, they gotta meet it.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else from the board?
did you close public hearing, Mr. Chair?
You know, I did not.
Oh.
I will close public hearing. Thanks, Mr. D.
I'm here for you.
Please. All right. All right, board, how do we want to move? I'm looking for a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I will move that we grant conditional approval of the site plan for the multifamily residential phase of the Village on Technology Hill Planned Unit Development, PUD. Londonderry Holdings LLC is the owner and the applicant. This is tax map 28, lots 31-6, 29-2, tax map 17, lots 2, 5-3, 5-4, 5-5. Last revised November 18th, 2024, with the precedent conditions to be filled within 120 days of approval and prior to plan signature, and general and subsequent conditions of approval to be fulfilled as noted in the engineering memo.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Kelly?
Could I ask what the consensus was for the conservation comment and heritage comment?
Yeah, so I guess we'll
I think that-
start with, he pretty much answered the
Yeah, I
EV
think
thing. I mean,
they answered
the
the
infrastructure is there. If the demand calls for it, you have the ability essentially to plug and play on the whole EV thing. You're putting everything there, you're just not, why invest the money if you don't know if anybody's gonna have an electric car?
Okay, so
Correct,
the-
and we're there to serve our tenant base. That's why we
Yeah,
volunteered
you're
up front at
preparing
the
for it.
PUD to
Yeah,
prepare for it.
Absolutely.
So the expectation of the planning board is that you're fine with what the applicant's representative
Yeah.
is even?
Yeah.
And the
absolutely.
heritage comment?
On the heritage comment, I know I actually don't think we really went over it too much, but, they did ask you about colors. Have you made any changes to your palette?
The colors as presented to Heritage Commission would be the ones we move forward with. Acknowledge they had one comment, and I think it was the champagne color, that a member or two said, well, we wouldn't mind seeing something else, but this is okay too, was essentially the gist that we got from it.
Thank you. I don't see anybody having an issue with it.
I'm okay, there's no need for them to go back and
Is it a
change.
champagne or a burgundy?
Colors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, I have a motion. I believe Lynn, did
I
you
have a
second
second.
that?
I
I have a
seconded
second
that.
from Lynn. If we could go by roll call vote, starting with Ann.
Okay, and it includes what John would like to do.
Correct, absolutely.
Ann Champa, aye.
Giovanni Barani, aye.
Lynn Wiles, aye.
Arthur Rugg, aye.
Jeff Penta, aye.
Jason Knights, aye.
Sean Faber, aye.
John Cruz, aye.
Jake Butler, aye, and your site plan has been approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see you in the next round.
Many rounds.
All right, let's see here. I believe that's all we have on the agenda tonight. No new plans, any other business?
Just have a question.
Sure.
Has the school made their contribution to the CIP yet?
I will let Mr. Penta answer that, but I believe we are getting very close to having our meeting.
Thank you, Jake.
Is that fair enough?
That's a great summary of what I was just gonna say.
Thank you.
That sounds
See,
good.
you spoke for me earlier, I spoke for you now.
One brain, one.
Mr. D, I saw a hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. One, I'd like the public record to show that the planning board tonight afforded the opportunity for public comment, and citizens were here to take advantage of that. There was one case, one round of public comment, and there you go. Second thing is, I would like to comment on a concept that was brought up at this board a month ago, or whenever it was, concerning a moratorium on building, if that's okay. So I think not doing anything, I think, is a disservice and leaves basically a hanging chad. And I don't think we need to take a vote on anything, but I think we need to have a consensus of, are we gonna ask the town council to do a moratorium, or are we basically just gonna table it at this level? Having done some work on it, as one person here tonight, one person's opinion is that the legal calamity that it could cause is very real. I think the case law is sketchy, and I think, again, one person's opinion, I think if something was enacted right now, that it could cost the taxpayers quite a bit of money and quite a bit of town and disrupt a lot of things. So that's my comment, and I'd like to not have it just hanging with nothing getting done. We need to have a consensus one way or the other.
Sure, absolutely. Does anybody from the board have anything to say? Would we like to just get a consensus here?
I think it's in the, our attorney, I know, is reviewing it. But I think the best approach would be a joint meeting with the town council. I mean, they're the ones that are going to make the decision on it. It's not us.
And also get the facts and figures behind this, too.
Yeah, you got a lot of data to put
Yeah.
together. So that falls upon staff.
My opinion is I do agree with a lot that Mr. DeFrancisco brought up. I think the concept was interesting to discuss, interesting to bring up. I think if we were to go down that road, we would have we need a significant plan on what we would do, on the reasons why. And I think, for my opinion, where I would really like to, one of the reasons why I was interested in that conversation was I really want to look at our infrastructure and kind of go to the town council and ask, I think, Sean, you brought that up earlier. We've had a significant amount of growth in the last 10 years, and we're seeing this with the master plan. We're in a catch-up mode here, and I want to really kind of understand what our infrastructure needs are. I think we can do that without a moratorium. I actually know, I'm fairly confident we could.
Yeah.
Without introducing the risk of having that go. And really, yeah, I've done a little bit of research on it. It's a long process to even get it approved. So it's not, yeah, just having a thing overhanging when we have so much other work that, this town, needs to, wants to do, has the ambition to do. And I really think kind of concentrating on our infrastructure needs can go in parallel with, kind of with those challenges that, that we would want to face.
Yeah, and I'm passionate about, our roads and infrastructure in this town need to catch up to all of this, the development that's gone on, and we're behind, and we need to analyze that. We need to come up with a good problem going forward. I don't know if others share that on the council with me, but I'm passionate about it, and we find some others, we can keep trying to push that forward because I feel we need to.
I'm one of the ones who came out in favor when it was brought up. But, thinking about it and having discussions, I think, we have limited resources in our staff and within the town, and I feel like those would be better served trying to address the issues that we have rather than trying to defend ourselves in something that probably would not hold up anyways. I live on Hull Road. Hull Road has borne the brunt of those new stop signs on Old Mammoth. It's literally turned into a highway. There are companies that just run their 18-wheelers up and down it all day long. So I would rather see situations like that get resolved rather than using our limited resources on, tilting at windmills on a growth moratorium that we would probably lose anyways.
Anything else from the board? I think what's important is we had the conversation about it, because it seems that a lot of the time we don't have conversations. So I think it's important that we had the conversation about it. Obviously, the council is aware of it. I hope that the council would support any efforts from the town in terms of funding actual infrastructure studies and improvements. And Sean, I know you're passionate about it. I greatly appreciate it because I feel as though, as a council member, it's being heard and it has not been heard. So I hugely appreciate that. I hope that through this conversation, our leadership at the council realizes that the infrastructure throughout this town is a real issue, and it should be front and center. And it needs to be discussed. It needs to be figured out how some of these improvements can be funded. And I will say that I think it's evident that you do have a passion for it, and I think that will hopefully create progress at the council level, which is ultimately the leadership of the town. I brought up the moratorium. I don't know what an answer is, but I brought it up to have a conversation because our leadership needs to realize how important this topic is, and that there are real concerns throughout the town. And I think that has happened, and I think that our leadership has understood that, and I'm optimistic that through your leadership on the council, this issue will continue to be pushed forward and actually seeing real progress for the first time in my memory, and I hope that, again, I hope that if I know Kelly had discussed a while back actually starting to fund something for infrastructure and roadways and studies, I hope the council supports that. And I think I'll leave it at that, Mr. Rudd.
I think with the council going through the budget process right now, there's probably more of a feeling there for what there is for demand for community services versus the cost of it, because Kelly was probably very young back in the mid '80s.
Wasn't here.
You weren't even here.
Sorry.
Then Londonderry had about the highest tax rate in the state. We're getting over 400 permits for new buildings per year, and the town quickly put together asked for a moratorium, They didn't follow procedure and everything, went to court right away, and the town lost. And the building kept on going, and it wasn't until, we put together a committee that looked at growth management. And it took about 2 years to have a real growth management on the books that utilized data. I mean, it had a, real purpose there to balance the needs versus the town's ability to.
And at the
afford it.
time.
Tony, probably you were here.
Yes, I was, and at the time, it was easily defensible because the schools were bursting at the seams. And that was something that the case law had already adjudicated, and so it was a slam dunk, it was a no-brainer. In this case, we don't have that. We don't have that to grab onto. And so the question you have to ask yourself, if you did have a moratorium now, today, what would it fix? It wouldn't fix the roads, it wouldn't add stop signs. The other way to look at it, and somebody from another town said that to me in a phone call that I made, the question was, if you need to fix a bunch of stuff, why would you cut off your revenue source that could be used to fix the stuff that you need to fix?
Yep.
And it was a little bit of an epiphany for me because, duh, wow, that makes perfect sense. And so I wish I could take credit for that comment, but I can't. I stole it from somebody way smarter than me that does it for a living.
There's nobody smarter than you.
That does it for a living, and it makes perfect sense. We need, right now, we need the revenue. For people who don't know, most people call it income. It isn't. We need money coming in.
There's a
We need money
balance
coming
there,
in,
and
so-
this is achieved through the budgeting.
At any rate,
process.
I think, Jake, the fact that you brought it up, I think is an important first step. And this is a snapshot in time, right? It's not like it's a forever decision. It's this snapshot in time. Probably, it looks like there's somewhat of a consensus to say, we're gonna either, whatever we're gonna do with it, but,
Well, if it didn't get brought up, this conversation wouldn't be happening.
correct, correct. And I think it's an important conversation, and it got some juices flowing in the town, apparently. And it's probably gonna continue in some form or fashion, whatever, but to Sean's point, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed, that are gonna need revenue. And so, here we are, so.
I think
There's-
go ahead, Art.
Oh, there is a growth management ordinance on our books. It just has sunsetted, so it's not, doesn't have any effect at all. So it'd be worthwhile to go back and.
It's kind of like saying you had $100, but you spent it, it's gone.
That's right. It has to be reenacted. That'd be the town council.
I think what's important, for me, and I've heard Mr. DeFrancesco say it before, is we turned over a rock and we explored options, and I hope coming out of this, the council starts to turn over some rocks and explore options of what we can do for the future of the community and what we can do for the pressing items that we have today that are not going anywhere. So I hope that with that, maybe the council can start turning over a couple rocks as well.
Yep. So it looks like no action from this board at this time? Is that a fair statement?
I think so.
Yep, unless we want to provide data to give
Yeah.
it support.
Look into it,
And
at
certainly,
least.
anybody at this table can bring up anything that they want at any meeting, at any time, at this part of a meeting.
Yep.
To bring up for discussion later on, or whatever. So, like I said, this is a snapshot in time, that's all it is. It's not a forever decision, so.
I think John just told us the meeting's over, so. If anybody doesn't have anything else, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Kelly?